going to be looking at your Essay 1 paragraphs. So at this point, you should have already done your Essay 1 outline, gotten that approved, gotten feedback on that, made any revisions that you need to, and now it's time to actually write your essay. So what I'm going to do is go over the different paragraphs that you're going to be working on. I'm going to be giving examples of what an outlined paragraph looks like versus a completed full paragraph. And I'm going to kind of show you what you're going to be adding and some different things to look for. So let's get started. So first, we're going to be looking at the introduction. So as you know, your introduction should start with a hook. This should be a quote from one of our Unit 1 readings. So if you've already completed your outline, you already have your quote chosen. So now you just need to incorporate it into your sentence. So make sure that your quote is in quotation marks and the name of the author should be mentioned within the sentence or in a parenthetical citation. So if you mention it within the sentence, you would say something like, Greg Ruth writes that, then you would have your quote, and that would be your citation. If you decide to do a parenthetical citation, that means that you're going to have your quote, and then at the end, in parentheses, you're going to have the last name of the author, which in my example would be Ruth, and then that is going to be your parenthetical citation. Personally, I recommend incorporating it into the sentence. I think that it flows a lot better that way, but it's totally up to you how you want to do that. Next, you're going to have 1 to 3 transition sentences where you connect the quote to your topic. So the quote that you've chosen as your hook probably doesn't have a direct relation to your topic, and so you're going to have to explain how that quote relates to the story that you've chosen as your topic for Essay 1. Finally, you're going to end with a thesis statement. Your thesis should mention the name of your story. It should explain how it impacted you as a child, which will be what you're going to discuss in body paragraph 2. And then you're going to explain how it impacted you as an adult, which is what you're going to be discussing in body paragraph 3. So everything should connect to what you're later going to talk about. So let's look at an example. So here I have an example of what a outline is going to look like. So up here I have my hook. So in the old days, fairy tales and stories for kids were designed to teach them to avoid places of danger, strangers, and weird old ladies living in candy-covered houses. They were cautionary tales for generations of kids who face death, real and tangible, almost each and every day. Ruth. So this would be an example of a parenthetical citation. I have my quote in quotation marks, and then I have the last name of the author in parentheses at the end. So what I'm probably going to do when I turn this into a complete paragraph is I'm going to get rid of the parenthetical and I'm going to instead tell my reader who the author is within the sentence. And I'll kind of show you how I do that. Next, after the hook, we have our introduced topic. So this is where I'm just kind of generally talking about how this relates to my story. So in my experience, cautionary tales are just as much a part of childhood now as they were in the old days. I grew up in a conservative community. I was told lots of cautionary tales to scare me away from bad behavior. I ended up really liking the stories. So because this is a narrative essay, it is completely appropriate to use your own personal experience in this essay because it's about you. So in this case, I'm using my personal experience to discuss this quote and the story that I've chosen and kind of talk about how they all connect. Finally, I end with my thesis statement. So the story of the Hook Man, which is the name of the story that I chose, was important to me growing up because it helped me to face my fears as a kid and taught me the importance of perseverance and never giving up as an adult. So that's going to be my thesis. I named my story. I'm talking about how it impacted me as a kid and then how it continues to impact me as an adult. Okay, so this is my outline. This is not the paragraph, right? This is not what I'm going to be submitting as my final essay. So now we need to turn this into that final paragraph. So let me show you what I did. Okay, so I color coordinated it to kind of make it easier to explain. You do not need to do that, but it's just an easy way of kind of showing you where each of the part of the outline ended up in this final paragraph. So you're going to notice there's a lot of similarities. Most of it really went unchanged. The first thing I really changed is I included the name of the article where the Greg Ruth quote came from. So it looks like here I didn't decide to include Greg Ruth within the sentence. That's fine. So instead, I just included the name of the article. So in the article, Why Horror is Good for You, the author explains that. Then I go into the quote, I already read it, and then I have my parenthetical at the end. I also could have said in the article why horror is good for you, Greg Ruth explains that, and then I wouldn't need this parenthetical at the end. Again, it's totally up to you. Both are considered proper citations. So then I transition into my kind of analysis of the quote and kind of how it relates to my topic. So as you can see, I kept most of it. So in my experience, cautionary tales are just as much of part of childhood now as they were in the old days. I kept that pretty much the same. Talked about growing up in a conservative community. And then I go a little bit more into the type of story that the hook man kind of falls into. So I said uh, I was always cautioned against engaging in bad behavior, the worst of which involved being alone with boys, which if you grew up conservative at all, that is the big thing, especially for girls. Some of my first exposure to scary stories were from adults who told them to warn us against the consequences of breaking the rules. Although I now know that being in my car with a boy will probably not lead to bloody murder, I still have fond memories of the cautionary tales that started my love of horror. So even though I'm no longer, conservative at all, and even though I no longer kind of believe in the cautionary tale of this story, it really did get me interested in scary stories as a whole. And so that's why I'm kind of using that as an example. And then I have my thesis statement here, which basically stayed the same. So that's going to be my introduction. As you can see, it's not super complicated. I didn't change or add that much, but I did add enough so that it flows a little bit better and we have better transitions between the parts. You're also going to notice I got rid of any of the titles or any of the parts where it says, hook, transition, thesis statement. You're going to get rid of that when you actually write your essay because it's up to you to make it clear when you're moving from one point to the next. Okay, so that is going to be our introduction. So let's look at the next part of this essay. So next we're going to move on to body paragraph 1. So we're going to start with a topic sentence that provides context to when and where you first heard the story. And this should be as detailed as possible. So what you're going to do is hopefully you've already kind of planned this out in your outline. But basically, you want to explain, as much as you can, as much as like your memories will allow, when you first heard the story, who told it to you, and how old you were, and then any kind of other general memories you have. So maybe it was something that scared you, or it got you excited, or it mesmerized you, or something like that. After you have that topic sentence, you're going to transition to telling the story itself. So again, you're going to want to use as much descriptive language as possible. So you want to tell the story in enough detail that even if I've never heard the story before, I understand the story, I understand the major characters, the major plot points. Obviously, if you're talking about a longer story, like say a Disney movie, we're not going to go through every single plot point. You're going to want to condense it down. But for those of you that are doing stories that are like family stories or fairy tales or something you grew up with, give me enough detail that I can understand the story and what it's about, and just be able to kind of understand why you like it. And then for your final paragraph should be around 1/2 to 3/4 a page once it's double spaced. So don't worry too much now about what that ends up being. You'll probably end up editing and adding a little bit more. But if you find that your finished body paragraph 1 is, only a couple sentences or is super short, maybe you need to add more detail into your descriptive retelling of the story. So just keep that in mind. We're looking for about 1/2 to 3/4 of a page once it's all typed up and double spaced. Okay, so let's look at my example. So I have my topic sentence here, where I'm talking about hearing the story for the first time. So from a young age, I remember there being specific scary stories that I loved to tell, and the Hook Man was always my favorite. I first heard the story when I was sleeping over at a friend's house. We were 8 years old, and my friend's mom came down to tuck us in and tell us a story. So this is kind of a good general information. I might add a little bit more when I do my final version of the paragraph, but I think this is a really good start and gives you a general sense of like how old I was and in what context I first heard the story. And then for the descriptive retelling, I just told the story with as much detail as I could remember. Again, I'm kind of working off of just like my memory as a kid. which a lot of you I'm sure are as well. So I'm not expecting perfection, but give me as much as you can remember. And if you need to kind of make some stuff up, if there's like some missing information and you think you kind of remember, that's totally fine. This isn't meant to be a research paper. It's really just meant to be your memory of the story. So for my story, I said the story starts off with a young couple in a car who are out on a date and decide to pull over and park on the top of a hill to get some alone time before they go home. In the story, the girl turns on the radio to listen to some music and hears an emergency news report that a man has escaped from the local asylum and is on the loose. He is described as highly dangerous and has a hook for a hand. The girl is scared and wants to go home, but the boy wants to stay. The girl agrees at first, but after a couple more minutes, she says she hears something outside that they should leave. The boy is not convinced, but at this point, the mood is ruined, and so he starts the car and drives down the hill and back to the main road. By the time they are back at the girl's house, she is feeling better and admits that she probably overreacted. The boy gets out of the car, walks around to open her door, and that's when he sees the hook hanging from the door handle. And that's basically the end of the story. So I have my topic sentence and I have my descriptive retelling. So let's go to the final paragraph. So as you can see, I didn't add a massive amount. I think I did a pretty good job with my outline of giving a lot of detail in my descriptive retelling. If you're someone who maybe didn't go into a lot of detail in your outline, which is fine, that just means you're going to have to add a lot more detail when you get to writing your final essay. So it's totally up to you how much detail you put into your outline, but the final draft does need to have as much detail as possible. So I have my topic sentence here. I have my story. I added a little bit more detail to the story as well as a little bit more detail to my topic sentence. You're welcome to kind of take a look. But for the most part, I left it as is. And yeah, that's basically what we're going to be looking for your body paragraph 1. You have your context to when and where you first read the story, and then a descriptive retelling of the story itself with as much detail as possible. Okay, so let's move on to the next paragraph. So this is body paragraph 2. This is a paragraph where you're going to be talking about how the story impacted you as a child. So this paragraph should begin with a topic sentence that states how the story impacted you as a child. You're going to introduce your first support example. Make sure the example is a narrative from your own life that supports the claim that you make in your topic sentence. So what that means is if you claim in your topic sentence that the story taught you to appreciate your family, or the story taught you to be more careful, then your 2 support examples need to be examples from your childhood of times where either you, if we're using like the being careful as an example, either where you wanted to be reckless but decided to be careful anyway, or where you weren't careful and what the consequences were. So that's going to be your support examples. So you need 2 of those. Both should be from your own life, so not from family members or friends or things that have happened to people that you know. They need to be things that happen to you directly, since this is a narrative and it's about you. You want to make sure that you have a transition from story 1 to story 2. You probably don't have that in your outline, but you are going to want to be adding it to your final draft. And then you want to make sure that you're not including too many extra details about the story. So body paragraph 1 is all about the story itself. That's where you go into detail about the plot and the characters and all those things. For body paragraph 2 and body paragraph 3, they should be mostly about you. You can mention the story, so maybe, you relate to a part of the story, but it should be mostly about your experiences. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like. Okay, so here is my outline. So you can see I didn't include that much detail here. So if my topic sentence says, from an early age, scary stories like The Hook Man have had a positive impact on my ability to face my fears. So that is what I'm going to be focusing on for my support examples. The story helped me to face my fears as a kid. Support 1, I talk about when I was really young, I used to be afraid of the dark. I had a really overactive imagination. I was always seeing kind of monsters in the closet and that sort of thing. And the story really helped me to be able to conquer my fears. And then support 2, I learned to stand up for myself and my intuition when I babysat my siblings. I was the oldest, and so I was able to keep them safe because I understood that if something didn't seem right, if something seemed off, it was okay to speak out or to do something about it. Okay, so let's look at the final paragraph. So you're going to see right away, I added a lot more detail to both of my support examples. So because I didn't really have that much detail here, it's my job now in my final draft to add in that missing detail. Otherwise, if I were just to combine all these things together, it would make a really incomplete paragraph, basically. There wouldn't be a lot of information here. So it's my job to make sure that I'm turning it into a complete paragraph. Okay, so I have my topic sentence. I didn't change it at all. And then for both of my support examples, I just added more details. Again, feel free to kind of read over and see what I added. But really, I just added more details. I explained more kind of my mindset, how the story impacted me, how I related to parts in the story. As I said, it's okay to mention details from the story when you're talking about, why you related to it, but you also want to make sure that it's mostly about you and not just about the story. And then I also added concluding statement. So that's something that you're going to want to do for your body paragraphs. It's just something to kind of conclude the main idea of the paragraph and then to, if possible, allude to kind of what's going to happen next in your essay. So I said, scary stories are an important part of my childhood and continue to be important into my adulthood. So that's alluding to the next paragraph where that's going to be the focus. Okay, and then finally we have body paragraph 3. Your paragraph should begin with a topic sentence that states how the story impacted you as an adult. So you're going to introduce your first support example, you'll have a transition, second support example, and again, same thing with body paragraph 3. We want to just make sure we're not reiterating too many examples from the story itself. So just like with body paragraph 3, we want to focus on you. You are the focus of this narrative. So both support examples need to be examples from your adult life, and they need to support whatever you're going to say in your topic sentence. So this is mine. So for my topic sentence, I said, as I have gotten older, I can see that my love of scary stories has made me love all types of stories, and it has also made me more compassionate on how fear impacts people. So that's going to be the focal point of this paragraph is how has it made me appreciate storytelling as well as the role of fear in people's lives. My support 1, I always loved stories, and it got me interested in analyzing and understanding what makes good storytelling. As a community college student, I got involved with creative writing, which led to writing for the school newspaper. So focusing on, this part of my early adult life where my love of storytelling got me invested in writing as well. And then for my support 2, kind of fast forward, as a teacher, I've learned how fear functions in education. I'm going to talk about my mom who returned to school when I was just starting teaching. She went back to community college because she had never gotten her college degree. And kind of seeing her go through that taught me a lot about kind of how fear and anxiety can impact the way that students feel about themselves and college and learning and that sort of thing. So once again, I didn't put in a lot of detail into my outline, so I'm going to want to add more when I go and work on the final draft of this paragraph. Okay, so here's my final draft. So I have my topic sentence here. Didn't change anything. It's the same as it was in the outline. Then I have my first support example. I added a little bit more information about, my experience, how working for the school newspaper allowed me to transfer to my dream school, as well as have other writing opportunities while in college. Then I transition into my second support. You can see that I'm using transition words, so things like another way or first of all. So those are all things that you should be using as you're moving between your examples in all of your paragraphs. So feel free to use those, and you can also find a list of other transitions if you go on Google. And then, so for my second support, I talk about scary stories have impacted me as an adult, being able to see how fear functions in education. I talk about my mom, how her experience went, and then how I was able to use what I learned from watching her to just be a better teacher in general. And then again, I have kind of a concluding sentence here. So I think that even if you don't grow up loving scary stories, we are all affected by fear and how it shapes the way that we see the world. So I'm taking this kind of very specific example of like scary stories being important for me, and kind of turning it into something that a lot of people can relate to, which is that, yeah, fear is something that we all experience. Facing the fear and learning to understand it is a great way to make it less powerful force in our lives. Okay, so that is going to be my final body paragraph. And then the last paragraph is going to be my conclusion. So again, this is something you probably worked on a little bit for your outline. But basically, what I recommend for conclusions is a three-part approach. So first, we want to start by referring back to your hook and discussing how it relates to your overall topic and experiences. So you don't necessarily need to just like copy and paste it directly, but it's about using an idea from your hook, whether it's the whole thing or just a part of it, and then talking about how it relates to your overall topic or themes in general. And it's just a really good way of concluding and making everything kind of wrap up and connect to each other. Once you've reiterated your hook and talked about that a little bit, you're going to re-examine the important points in your essay. So I know a lot of the time teachers will just tell you to kind of rewrite your thesis, but I don't necessarily recommend that. What you're going to want to do is consider what you think the most important parts of your essay are. What are you most proud of? What do you think is most important to you, and the story that you want to tell, and the information that you want people to remember after they read your essay? So think about that, and then I would just include that here. So whatever you think is the most important thing, that's what you're going to re-examine. And then you're going to end with your final thoughts on the topic. So why does this topic matter? How does it impact the current generation? What are your thoughts after writing this essay? Really anything that comes to mind. So for my example, I have my revisit hook. So what I decided to do, because I chose a pretty long quote, is I just chose a part of the quote that I wanted to re-examine. So that's the part of the quote that I'm going to be looking at. Then for the main points, I want to talk about how scary stories get a bad reputation, but they are actually really important, and how we need to, take them more seriously as a way that children use to kind of cope with the scariness of the world. And then for my final thoughts, it seems like the art of telling a good story is mostly lost to kids that are growing up now. These kids are going to have their own challenges and fears to face. So my kind of thoughts is that I don't know if, telling scary stories and kids reading scary stories is as common now as it used to be. And I, wonder how they're coping with fear and how they're coping with their anxieties if they don't have those. So that is going to be my outline for that. And then this is my final paragraph for my conclusion. So you can see it's way shorter than the rest of the paragraphs, but it's still about half a page double-spaced. And that's really what I'm looking for the conclusion. So it doesn't have to be super long, but I also don't want it to be so short that it's like 3 sentences and then we're done. So you want it to be about this long. So you can see here in the red, I spend a good amount of time talking about the Greg Ruth quote, or the part of the Greg Ruth quote that I chose to revisit, talking about, how it relates to my topic in general and to me and my experiences. Then in the yellow, we're talking about what I think is the most important takeaway of the essay. And then in green is kind of my final thoughts. So that is going to be what I'm going to have for my conclusion. So now it's your turn. So take a look at your outline, see, where you could add more detail, where you might want to add some more. And then what I recommend doing is just copy and paste something, or copy and paste the different parts of your outline on on a different document, and then just go through and add more detail. So if the paragraph is super short, then look for places where you can add more information. Look where you can add transitions. Make sure that anytime you're moving from one section of the outline to the other, so for example, here, so anytime I'm moving from one support to the second support, I need transition words. So, one example would be put here, and then a second example is, and then I would talk about my support too, or something like that. Make sure that you have those transitions, make sure that you have that detail, and hopefully you end up with something that you feel good about. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And then I look forward to getting your final paper once you are all done, and I will talk to you guys later.